Now, ladies and gentlemen, I get to introduce our first two speakers this morning for the SOFIC 2019, and it is truly an honor. General Rich Clarke, the commanding general, was born in Germany and raised in an Army family. In fact, he met his wife in a high school in West Berlin, when there still was a West Berlin. He was commissioned in the infantry in 1984 when he graduated from West Point. He earned a Master's of Business Administration from Benedictine College, and he's a distinguished graduate of the National War College. General Clarke has led soldiers at all levels in airborne, ranger, mechanized, and light infantry units in 5 different Army divisions. General Clarke spent 8 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment, commanding at all levels from company through the regiment. He also served as the commander of the 3rd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division. His most recent assignments include serving as the Director of Operations for Joint Special Operations Command, Deputy Commanding General of Operations, 10th Mountain Division, the 74th Commandant of Cadets, United States Military Academy at West Point, Commander, 82nd Airborne Division, and the J5 Director of Strategy, Plans, and Policy, Joint Staff, Washington, D.C. General Clarke's deployments while serving in the aforementioned positions include Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, Operation Joint Guardian in Macedonia, 3 deployments in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, 4 deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and 1 deployment as the commander of the Combined Joint Forces Land Component Command, Operation Inherent Resolve. Coming on stage with him will be Mr. Jim Smith. He is currently the Acquisition Executive and Senior Procurement Executive for U.S. Special Operations Command here. He has responsibility for all the Special Operations Forces research, development, acquisition, procurement, and logistics programs, as well as management of the SOF Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics Workforce Enterprise. He's a graduate of West Point in 1986 and was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the infantry. He served in a variety of positions and commanded at many levels. Following receipt of his Master of Science degree in 1995, he served as an associate professor in civil engineering and mechanical engineering at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Mr. Smith retired from active duty military on 31 October 2013 after 27 years of service, and he immediately assumed his position as the Deputy Director of Acquisition for SOF AT&L Headquarters USSOCOM. He is now, just recently, in the past year, moved up to the position as the Director, the Senior Acquisition Executive for Special Operations Command. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my true honor to introduce our opening speakers, General Rich Clarke and Mr. Jim Smith. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. And congratulations and thanks to General Carlisle and NDIA for our 100th year anniversary. So I was joking with General Carlisle and General Boozer beforehand. I said, hey, can I come up and announce a Morehouse state type moment and say that all fees will be waived for all participants in this? And it didn't go over very well, but I did try for everybody. But good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking time to be here for our Special Operations Industry Conference. And thanks to the City of Tampa and the Mayor for hosting this. We are so lucky to be here in the greater Tampa area, and the support that you provide our military and its personnel are just amazing. And as I was leaving MacDill Air Force Base this morning and driving along the beautiful bay shore, it just gave me, it always calls to reflect how beautiful it is coming into the city of Tampa. As our vehicles were moving down about 30 miles an hour, we passed General Thomas, my predecessor, doing about 25 miles an hour on a bike, and we waved, and it really put it in the moment. Where should I be right now? What is he doing right now with his about 5 days worth of scruffiness on his beard, knowing that this time last year at this exact point, he was here in front of this audience. But to the staff and crew of the Tampa Convention Center, thanks for providing a fantastic venue, and welcome to our representatives of the Department of Defense, especially those from our Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, fellow flag officers, industry partners, academia, and research professionals whose interactions, dialogue, and leadership are key to this venue. I am also glad to have the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict, the Honorable Owen West, here with us today. We greatly appreciate that all SOLIC does in advocacy and oversight roles within the Department of Defense to care for our SOF warriors. And finally, I want to congratulate the SOF AT&L for executing this conference. This event just doesn't happen on its own. It's the fruit of a detailed planning and hard work. And Jim Smith, to you and your team, you've done a fantastic job. Thank you. Today, SOCOM is focused squarely on the implementation of the National Defense Strategy. This strategy acknowledges the reemergence of great power competition in a global security environment with continuing threats from globally networked violent extremist organizations, but also rogue states, armed with weapons of mass destruction, and in some cases, nuclear ambitions. The advancement and commercial availability of new technologies amplifies these threats by increasing both their speed and their reach. In response, our National Defense Strategy lays out 3 lines of effort: increase lethality, strengthen alliances and expand partnerships, and reform the department for increased efficiency and affordability. These lines of effort are central to our SOCOM and you, our industry partners. The task here for this week remains to implement that NDS for now and in the foreseeable future. As we pursue these objectives along these paths, we must also address the particular challenges that great power competition and VEOs present to our American military advantage. On today's more lethal and disruptive battlefield, we expect to see challenges to U.S. dominance of electromagnetic spectrum, cyber intrusion into communications networks, and distortion of the truth in social media. Advances in automation will shrink decision windows for commanders. Populations will be influenced through messaging platforms that will emphasize speed and mass over accuracy. All the while, our adversaries will seek these effects outside of the open warfare, where attribution is obscured and deniability is preserved. You are key partners in meeting this challenge. In America's startups, industry and academic research labs, and tech hubs, technology and service are being developed that will increase individual and aggregate lethality and improve human, physical, and more importantly, cognitive performance. We're looking to you to help bring us solutions to the challenges of sustaining our SOF operators in this environment and speeding up their ability to absorb data and to make more rapid decisions. It is within our reach today to identify logistics, supply, and communication network shortfalls or breakdowns before they happen. I emphasize before. Signature reduction is no longer a matter of camouflage or just communication security. It now pertains to a wider variety of indicators previously undetectable by human senses or a combination of these senses that can now be correlated by computational power of adversary sensor systems. And all of this at a pace that is heretofore unimaginable. So bring us leap-ahead products and services that will ensure our overmatch. The pace of evolutionary improvements is no longer sufficient to our challenges and will only serve to erode our advantage even more rapidly. As the National Defense Strategy states bluntly, legacy systems are irrelevant to the defense of our people. I'm going to expand what American SOF needs by walking you through SOCOM priorities. Coming into command, I received specific and clear guidance from the Assistant Secretary of Defense, the Acting Secretary of Defense, about the current readiness and future development of SOF. 3 weeks ago, in my first commanders conference, we pulled together all the commanders of all the components and all our Theater Special Operations Command. And I said, we're not leaving until we get our commander's priorities straight and that all the commanders get to weigh in on this. It was almost like having a conference and saying, sliding pizza underneath the door and saying, we're not leaving. Of course, the chief of staff said, sir, we have an hour and a half on the schedule. I said, we're going to stay here until this is done and accurate. And after really good debate and discussion, we refined these 5 priorities that I'm going to talk about today. First priority is compete and win for our nation. SOF provides unique capabilities to our nation. We counter resident violent extremist ideologies and degrade these organizations' ability to attack Americans and its interests. We've been pretty good at fighting the VEOs for the last 18 years, and we'll continue to do so. But we're going to focus on those that are the biggest threat to our homeland. At the same time, we apply our SOF capabilities to help the nation prevail in great power competition, especially the competition space beneath the threshold of armed conflict. Allow me to give you 2 examples. The contemporary global information environment is defined by the movement of messages and data in more forms and at a blistering pace than at any time in human history, and it shows no signs of slowing down. We're in an era of technological development more momentous than Gutenberg's printing press. This era brings tremendous promise of good, but we also know that our adversaries are weaponizing information in new ways that will seek to erode trust among allies and partners in an open and free international order. In response, we need systems that allow us to recognize false info and messages of all types, to characterize disinformation or deceptive data, to notify and respond rapidly using the strength of automation, particularly in the area of human language processing. We also need faster sentiment analysis to measure the impact of message on vulnerable populations. That's one way you can help. Another way you can help is countering weapons of mass destruction. The threat of weapons of mass destruction still exists. State and non-state actors alike continue to pursue, stockpile, and employ chemical weapons. They pursue biological weapons as well. Adversaries pursuing a coercive strategy of undermining a free and open global community give us no reason to think that they will employ tactics and weapons consistent with international norms or values. The threat of enemy employment of these weapons is real, and it is foolish to assume that SOF has no requirement to fight in a dirty operating environment. One of SOF's most important no-fail missions is to deter the use of WMD, to detect the location of unaccounted for WMD, and when necessary, to recover and render them safe. We need technologies across the full spectrum of the pathway our adversaries will pursue to ultimately employ a weapons of mass destruction to allow us to successfully counter this mission. My second priority is to preserve and grow SOF readiness. The foundation of SOF readiness is our superior assessment, selection, training, education, and talent management. In each of these functions, we root judgments in our objective operational requirements. The maturation of data science and its expanded applications can benefit SOF in these areas by helping us to identify and remove biases and discover hidden factors. In this way, we can identify and field a more effective SOF force of warriors. We could use manpower data analytics to help us in areas ranging from finding potential recruits for a special operations career to monitoring readiness and a predictive ability to avoid performance and capacity shortfalls. As simulation and modeling improves, we can increase repetition of operational actions and decrease material and travel cost of training. We can connect geographically dispersed capabilities to increase joint and combined arms readiness. If we improve in these areas, we can increase the readiness of a lean force. The third priority for SOCOM is to innovate for future threats. In my guidance of the force in taking command, I directed them to press the limits of research and development in our acquisitions. You, our industry partners, play a key role in this process. In fact, we can't do it without you. I am willing to accept risk in this area, and that is exactly what we did with the Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit, commonly known as TALOS. We aimed for a very difficult standard. In fact, press that I read today called it a moonshot, but a moonshot that was worthy of taking. To provide a complete soldier system that would make the SOF operator less vulnerable to enemy fire during assault while making him more tactically aware. Through the pursuit of this goal, the discoveries we made produced several technologies that will be transitioned into fielded systems and tools. Some of these technologies and lessons are already finding their way into increased focus on making our operators more cognitively aware. We want them to be able to make faster and better decisions when and where it counts. We call this concept the hyper-enabled operator. It is a quest to get the right information to the right person at the right time to create tactical advantage in the cognitive space. As we have noted in other venues, we are reinforcing our efforts to enhance the operator's cognition at the edge by increasing situational awareness, reducing cognitive load, and accelerating decision-making. We will be looking to industry for new and innovative ways to bring this reality to the forefront. The nature of the industry SOF collaboration is changing as our personnel learn and adapt to new technological possibilities. We have a force of incredible problem solvers. They are establishing their own garage labs, frequently well forward in the operating environment, to develop solutions to technical and tactical problems they are facing. Let me give you an example. Last month, one of our SOF formations identified the need to conduct ground reconnaissance in a high-threat GPS environment where constraints on human mobility would prevent operators from wearing appropriate protective equipment. There's a picture of it there. When the unit took this requirement to industry, the response they got back was 10 months, $1.2 million. A time period and an amount that was unresponsive and expensive. They went back to the whiteboard, took stock of their own in-house skills and commercially available, and they fielded their own system that met the requirement in 4 days and a total pocket expense of $7,000. That's the picture on the right. What this provided to the operators on the ground was a remote-controlled truck system with integrated light detection and ranging, LiDAR, simultaneous localization and mapping, SLAM, and electro-optical infrared sensors. The information it collects is reported back to the operator via subterranean communications capability on the vehicle. This accomplishment presents a couple of lessons to both industry and SOF leaders. First, we have some really, really good people that are in our generation of SOF professionals, and they're growing in our ranks. At SOCOM, our challenge is to understand and grow these men and women and put their skills and intellectual use to new ways on the battlefield. For industry, what you should expect from us is to work with enterprising and tech-savvy operators with whom you can collaborate to press the edges whenever possible. Together, we will be an unbeatable team that preserves the combat overmatch that our country requires. Fourth, in my priorities is the advancement of our partnerships. Line of effort number 2 of the NDS is strengthening alliances and expanding partnerships. This is a core SOF capability. The recent destruction of ISIS territorial holdings in Iraq and Syria by forces that were advised and enabled by U.S. SOF demonstrates this exceptionally well. This is successful surrogate operations in the history of mankind, when a partner force of less than 100 grew to a partner force of 60,000 and waged a successful campaign against an implacable foe with great resolve. As we orient in the future of pressing strategic threats to the open and free international order, capability to the joint force. Industry can expand and improve our ability in this mission area by developing suites of low bandwidth, secure communications, and collaboration tools that allow SOF to more rapidly and securely advise and enable our partners. Help us not only with the security and resilience of these networks that connect us, but also in the ways these tools decrease friction from cultural and linguistic differences. Help us span the gap between map-using vice non-map-using cultures, or between those that give directions by referring to intersections instead of streets. We will also need to provide logistical and medical support to our partner forces that is tailored to their specific needs and conditions. America will not fight and win alone. Therefore, it is critical that SOF is well equipped to maximize our partnership alliances by creating common understanding and enabling their success. My fifth and last priority for SOCOM is to strengthen our force and families. At SOCOM, we know that our people are our most precious resource. From actions on the objective all the way back to home station, it is our military, civilians, and their families, and not platforms or equipment that will make SOF victorious for our nation. So it is no surprise that we place a high priority on providing comprehensive support to all elements of human capital. Our goal is to extend care and reduce risk in every part of our formation. America makes significant investment in our special operations forces, and we seek to preserve that investment and to bolster their resiliency, lengthen their careers, and assist them in a healthy transition. I believe this is the best way to keep faith with our people. One of the key areas we're concerned with is brain health. Science is progressing to give us new insights that help us preserve the health of the force and understand what the rigors of training and combat are doing to it. Technologies that help us to accurately baseline brain health and detect anomalies will be central to this cause. We will continue to pursue increased human performance by deeper understanding of human physiology and the limits of endurance and performance. Our programs will focus on prehabilitation as well as rehabilitation. Once again, data science applications, together with microsensors, promise to help us understand ourselves and increase our tactical performance and resilience. These are challenging times. In the midst of excitement and energy we all sense from the daily innovations that we are seeing on so many fronts, I urge all of us to keep our attention action focused on the goal of fielding combat credible and ready special operations forces. I will close by thanking you once again for being here this week, for your time this morning, and for what you're doing to make us all better. I'm going to turn over here to Jim in just a minute, but I have an admission. My first time at SOFIC was 10 years ago. My last time at SOFIC was 10 years ago as a colonel. So any questions as we turn it, all the tough questions will go to Jim Smith at the end. I will phone a friend to him in every case, but I look forward to fielding your questions, and I'm going to welcome Jim Smith up to the stage. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning. Hey, listen, I want to start where General Clarke left off, and that is to say thank you. This is a great, great venue. I often introduce myself sometimes in a strange crowd and say I'm Jim Smith, and I'm a government acquisition professional. and it sounds sometimes like you're starting into a 12-step process where the first thing you got to do is admit you have a problem. But I will tell you, it's a real privilege to be the acquisition executive for United States Special Operations Command, and I say that for two reasons. We all know the American public is getting a little bit more distanced, I would say, from the military, and especially from Special Forces. It's a very small, it's elite force, and so the privilege of working on behalf of those special operators, to me, is something that I understand the ground I'm standing on. But the other piece that I hold equally as a privilege is my ability to work with the American industry base, to walk factory floors, to meet the engineers, to engage with technicians, to talk to assembly line workers. I mean, that's a rare privilege as well that a lot of folks don't get a chance to do. And so I think that's really what this week is all about, right? Everyone here sits at that intersection of there's a large capacity for technology and industry base behind you, and there is a problem set for soft operations that General Clarke just walked through in front of you. So there's great opportunities here, and I'm really thankful that you're here. As General Clarke said, we've focused this week around the National Defense Strategy. It's a very good place to start. He mentioned the 3 lines of effort, which are the 3 lower circles in that Venn diagram there. I'm really going to focus on the 3 o'clock and the 6 o'clock circle. I'm going to frame my points around building a more lethal force and reforming the department, or in our case, reforming soft acquisition. At the intersection of those 2 circles is what General Carlisle talked about, accelerating, in our case, soft innovation, but what the NDS calls accelerating the cycle of innovation. And so we liberally borrowed that phrase from the National Defense Strategy as the theme for this year's conference, and I think it's a very good theme indeed. So let me start with build a more lethal force. I'm going to go through this next set of slides fairly rapidly. And the point that I want you to gather from these slides is that this conference is specifically set up to be a little bit different than other conferences. It's specific. We've gone to great length to make this a two-way conversation. We've got our program executive officers, we've got our directors. They are all here in the classrooms that surround this conference room, and they are ready to present information to you, present opportunities, and then to take your questions. And to me, there's a center of gravity to the week at SOFIC that is really out in those classrooms. Sometimes I'll come to a SOFIC, and I've been to a few more than General Clarke has, and I'll talk to folks, and they haven't left the display floor. And the analogy I would use is it's like fishing. If you're going out to fish a stream, if you haven't fished that stream before, if it's strange to you, you don't really know where the deep pools are or where the eddies are. I'm not really a fisherman, so this analogy is going to run away on me. But if you can get a guide, that knows that stream, then you're going to be a lot more efficient. So if you sit up in the booths all week, a lot of fish are going to come by. There's going to be a great energy all week, and you're going to get a lot of fish. But if you find some balance this week and you make your way into the PEO's demonstrations and their presentations and the director's presentations, they're like your guides. They're going to point out to you some opportunities that are coming up in the near term. They're going to give you feedback on what really resonates and what doesn't resonate with them. So I would really ask you to find that balance and spend your time in both. And as I go through these next few slides, I'm going to go a little bit fast, but in the bottom right-hand corner, hopefully in text size you can read, is those PEOs that are interested in those technologies. So let's start with Next Generation ISR. Next Generation ISR, as again General Clarke said, the National Defense Strategy is pushing us towards near-peer competition. And certainly with Next Generation ISR, we think finding, finishing, or fixing and finishing, exploiting and analyze will still be a very core, soft problem to solve, even in near-peer competition. The question will be, how do we do it? And I think, can we do that from space? Can we do that in the cyber domain? Can we do that by fusing sensors? I think the answer is yes to all those questions. And if you're interested in that domain, then I would encourage you to see PEO Fixed Wing, where our ISR predominantly lives, but also PEO Strategic Reconnaissance and Site Exploitation. That's where a lot of the new pushes for the space domain and the cyber domain you're going to find in PEO SRSC. Next Generation Mobility. As General Clarke said, hey, we have a lot of legacy platforms, and we've got legacy platforms that are going to take us through the next 5 or 7 years. We're going to have AC-130s and MC-130s for the next few years. We're going to have MH-47s for the next few years. We're going to have shallow water combat submersible, combatant craft assault, combatant craft medium. All these are going to be relevant platforms for the foreseeable future. So the challenge for us is, how do you make those platforms more relevant in a near-peer competition scenario? How do you make them more survivable? Similarly, we will have some new platforms, I think, over the next few years. We're following the future vertical lift efforts very, very closely. We think the soft modification to those airframes will be something that's in our future. And believe it or not, even though we've just got our first dry combat submersible into the water just recently, we're only going to build 3 of those, and we're already thinking about what dry combat submersible next looks like. How do we make that system more relevant? How do we make that system more interoperable with where the Navy's going with their undersea platforms, their submarines? So there's a lot of opportunity space there. And again, if you're interested in that, PEO fixed wing, PEO maritime, PEO rotary wing, PEO soft warrior, for those different types of platforms, you'll find good traction there. Precision fires and effects. We are moving very aggressively in this domain. We are looking for a missile that can be employed by a small team or individual even that has the capabilities that you see on this slide. Additionally, we're also looking for capability in the RF spectrum. So for SOF, when we think of counter-UAS, the services are having a tendency to think about it as air defense. We don't think about counter-UAS as air defense. We think about it as air-based IEDs. So a very similar problem set. Our operators are still being impacted by IEDs on the battlefield in a major fashion, and counter-UAS is certainly starting to become a bigger problem for our forces out there. So whether that device is in the ground domain or in the air domain, not as important to us. We want to be able to detect, defeat, exploit, and analyze all those. So if you're interested in this domain, PEO Soft Warrior for precision fires and effects, and for effects in the RF spectrum as well. Data and networks. What's fascinating to me is that 2 years ago at SOFIC, I can tell you that I didn't get a single question on big data. I didn't get a single question on artificial intelligence. I didn't get a single question on machine learning. Without exaggeration, last year at this conference, every single question in the large business forum was on big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning. This year, we've added an entire venue to the Thursday morning piece that I highly encourage you all to go to. Our Chief Data Officer, Mr. Dave Spurk, will lead a panel up here about this very topic. I highly encourage you to stick around through Thursday morning to attend that. So we get it. We understand where we got to go with this technology. This spans everything from tactical radios, communications that will work with our partners, as General Clarke mentioned, in that near-peer environment, all the way through the architectures for our global SOF operations, to cloud-based technologies, et cetera. Very broad area. If you're interested in that area, PEO C4 is who you want to talk to this week. Undergirding all that, just as the CG just talked about with our SOF operators, humans are more important than hardware. Undergirding all of that is our biotechnology area. Okay, and as the CG said, how do you get folks ready? How do you sustain them during? And how do you get them back in the fight after they've returned? So that's really, really important to us. I'm going to spend some time on this topic over the next few slides, actually. But this is primarily in the PEO Soft Warrior lane and in our science and technology lane. So as I transition to the next slide, I'm going to ask Master Sergeant Knetz to join me on stage, please. And hopefully that works out. Okay, so General Clarke, outflank me. There you go. General Clarke mentioned, TALOS, our Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit. And last year on this stage, I made the mistake. I'm going to try not to do it this year. I said, I will have you the prototype on the stage next year. So here it is. Now, as General Clarke mentioned, we did go after an exoskeleton because here was the deal. We started off with a problem statement that said, I want to increase the survivability of the first person through the door in a conflict, in a hostile situation. Just think about that for a second. That was the original intent. We made the assumption that there would be no advances in body armor. So to carry that much body armor to increase the survivability of the individual, it was going to require an exoskeleton. And it was going to be so much weight that exoskeleton would need to be powered. So I really want to encourage you to, when you get a chance this week, to go all the way down on this level, all the way down to the right, down to classroom 11 or conference room 11, whatever the right term is. That's where our joint acquisition for task force for TALOS is located. and you will see the current state of the art of that exoskeleton. The exoskeleton's there. It's a very capable system. What we've realized is that there's a further advancement that needs to occur for that exoskeleton to be usable in a close combat environment. The most difficult physical environment you can imagine, close combat for these operators, we've got some work to do yet. What Master Sergeant Knetz is wearing here is technology that will spin out from that TALOS effort. So Master Sergeant Knetz, 20-year Army veteran, 11 of the past years in Special Forces, Green Beret, and we've been very fortunate to have him for the last year on our Joint Acquisition Task Force. And I'm going to walk through the slide, so I need the slide to come back up here, up on the slide here. And so we're not going to ask Master Sergeant Knetz to disrobe. He's already uncomfortable enough, I assure you. So this first layer that he's wearing here is the operational stress index, what kind of stress is the operator under, and also, his vitals, his vital signs. We can monitor those in that first layer, this base layer. The next layer is the challenge to the body armor that I mentioned. And what I talked about, our typical spear body armor, our current system, covers around 15-17% of your body area, 15 to 17%, depending on how big a person you are. So a front plate and back plate. For the same weight penalty, for the same weight across the board, the body armor that Master Sergeant Knetz is wearing covers closer to 44 to 50%. So at least a 2x increase in the body area coverage of what he's wearing. Not quite the same performance standard, but this body armor challenged our assumption that body armor wasn't going to get lighter in the next 5 years. It has gotten lighter. And it's going to show a lot of operational. Some of the technology that Master Sergeant Knetz is wearing has already transitioned to our forces. So body armor, he's wearing the same weight that he would have with his normal kit, so it kind of challenges the assumption that you would need an exoskeleton. And then this third layer, what happened with the exoskeleton? Well, so you'll see the full exoskeleton down, if you go all the way around the horn down to Classroom 11. But Master Sergeant Cadet is wearing what we call ankles and knee pneumatic support. And what that does is it decreases the metabolic tax on the operator. So the ankles, we've got operators that will run much faster and further than they would without that ankle support. And we've got the knees allow them to carry a greater load and go up a slope or a set of stairs with a load much better than they would be able to do on their own. So that support of that ankle and that knee is something that the operators have told us they would take into combat. Maybe not all the way to the objective, but it would definitely be helpful for them to get to the objective. And then would take it off as they entered the objective area. So very exciting. Now the other thing about TALOS is 3D audio, the small arm stabilization on the rifle, and all of it integrated. There's a battery pack integrated into his armor plate and his back, powering the full system. So an integrated system that's fightable for the operator all came out of the TALOS effort. Master Sergeant Knetz, thank you very much. Give him a hand, please. I'm going to owe him for that. That base that we've set with those technologies enables us to transition, as General Clarke talked about, into this hyper-enabled operator, which we define as improved cognitive ability at the edge. So if you think about some of the things, I didn't call out the virtual look-down device, but things of that nature that are going to enable that operator to have a cognitive advantage at the edge, where they are. And so what we're talking about there is increased situational awareness, reduced cognitive load, and greater decision-making capability. The way I want to think about hyper-enabled operator, the way I've asked the team to think about it is through a vignette. We all know that the storyline matters very much in this information domain. So if you think about what we ask our special operators to do, especially in these partnered operations that the CG talked about, especially in near-peer competition, a lot of what they do is talking to indigenous forces to either recruit partnered forces, work with partnered forces, or find out if someone has the potential to be a partnered force or something else. So if we can give them voice-to-text, text-to-voice capability, language translation capability, facial recognition capability, and things like stress index? Can I tell the person I'm talking to, can I tell how much stress they're under? Those type of technologies at the edge on the operator can greatly facilitate those types of engagements that we ask our special operators to do. So it's going to drive a lot of our technology, computing at the edge, those virtual look-down devices, access to the cloud at the edge, those types of things. So we're very excited about where the hyper-enabled operator is going to take us over the next few years. I want to talk very quickly. The CG mentioned that one of his priorities was readiness. So ready equipment, ready force. So readiness equipment, a lot of you are here because you're interested in logistics and sustainment. The truth about USSOCOM is we do a lot of that effort, logistics and sustainment, out of our PEO for soft sustainment activity up in Lexington, Kentucky. Easy for me to say. We just awarded a very large contract to a prime at Lexington. It's probably the largest contract in USSOCOM history, 10-year contract, $8 billion. But that doesn't mean there's not still opportunities for you all, because we built into that contract a 35% small business set-aside. So there's plenty of opportunity there. If you want to operate in this space, I highly encourage you to go down to the PEO SOFSA and our Director of Logistics, our J4's presentations during the week. Likewise, Ready Force, Commander talked quite a bit about this. Our PEO for services does the services that enable our SOF operators. You can see some of the examples up here. We are no different than the DoD in USSOCOM. We spend as much money on services as we do on equipping. And I know many of you are here to talk about services. So during the week, make sure you see PEO services and talk to them about their opportunities that are coming up in this space. All right, I want to transition to reform the department. In our case, reform SOF acquisition. This is a boring slide that really talks about something that I find tremendously exciting. Maybe that's just me. But what we've done is we've taken some of the capabilities, some of the authorities that Congress and OSD have provided to us in the recent past years, and we've strung them together into an acquisition pathway. So we've got a partnership intermediary agreement with SOFWorks, which I'll talk a little bit about more in a few minutes. But that's a great platform for us that you all should be familiar with. And we've used that platform to communicate with industry. And then we're going to go all the way to the right-hand side, and we're going to make awards based off of that communication with other transaction agreements. So let me give you an example of that. This Collider event that we did over the spring, we took our program managers' problems, their tangible problems that they had funding to solve, and we threw them, distributed them out via two things. On the same day, we announced these problems on FedBizOps, which is the traditional way of communicating with the government, and the SOFWorks ecosystem. So SOFWorks has been around for about 4 years now, and we've developed quite an ecosystem over time, email distribution list if you want to say it that way, but the ecosystem of folks that are interested in solving SOF problems. Same day, we announced this challenge both on FedBizOps and the SOFWorks ecosystem. We had 300 white papers come back to that. Here's the fascinating thing. 3% of those responses came back from FedBizOps. 60+% came back from the SOFWorks ecosystem. The other 20-odd% came back from word of mouth, heard it from a friend, that kind of thing. But if I had gone strictly with the traditional FedBizOps, I would have got 9 white papers, if my math is right, as opposed to 300 white papers. So really, really interesting to me where the folks that are interested in solving problems for the SOF community, where they're listening, where they're looking for that demand signal. So we're going to take those white papers. We've already done the one-on-one assessments of those where we had the teams come in and brief. We did about 50 of those. We plan to award around 25 other transaction agreements based on those white papers that came in. I would ask you to reflect. Last year at this time, in 2018, we had awarded a total of 3 OTs. And I kind of challenged the team, and you challenged us to get better at it. And I would say we're very good. Our proficiency at doing other transaction agreements has increased, almost 3x at this point. We're doing 20 or plus this year. So I'm really excited about that. Middle tier acquisitions. Here's why you should care about middle tier acquisition. I know many of you in here in this room have come in with a great idea. And the response you got back from us to your great idea was, hey, that's a great idea. But I don't have a validated requirement for that. It'll take me about 12 months to get a validated requirement. Or we might say, hey, that's a great idea, but I don't have any funding in the budget, so it'll take me 2 years to get it into the POM. So there is a valley of inactivity, I'll call it that, from that 0 to 2 year time frame that I believe USSOCOM can use middle-tier acquisitions to get after. You should not hear that as a response from us anymore. We may be politely telling you we don't like your technology if that's the response you get, but that won't be the case. We should be able to operate very rapidly in this middle-tier acquisition space, and I plan to dominate that space. What you'll see is, you can see on the list of things we're working on, and you'll also note that all of DoD has this authority. SOCOM, although it's 2% of the DoD budget, we represent 25% of all the DoD middle-tier acquisition efforts that are ongoing right now. And I think that number is going to grow because this is a space we can dominate. I want to move and talk a little bit about our relationship in the information era. The first picture there is that dry combat submersible. And we wrote this requirement a few years ago, and this requirement was very much based on the physical domain. The iron triangle, speed, payload, range. Those are the things that we held dear. And when you do that, you get a very capable pressure vessel that can carry our SEALs, and we're finding now that we're kind of strapping on some of the sensors that need to go onto it. In the information domain, I want you to challenge us, and I'm going to challenge you, that our requirements should be based more on information. Every piece of equipment that we have out there is an information node. Information goes in, information comes out. And if we start thinking about what's important for that item of equipment or that technology as an information node, does that change the way we think about the design of that device? And I think it does. I can't tell you exactly how, but like I said, there are opportunities that are coming up for greater collaboration. And I think that fundamental change in thinking that every piece of equipment out there is an information node will change the way we do requirements. Likewise, data. Listen, I need your help on this. We cannot lock down data. I need to own the data. I need to have the data. I need to have an architecture for data. If the commander asks me for some information and I've got to go to vendor A under one protocol and vendor B under another protocol and do a third-party integration, that's not going to work in this domain. You know it's not going to work in this domain. So data needs to be available to the government, and I need to own it, and that's going to be the relationship we have going into this information environment. The third point about there is cybersecurity. We know that our information systems are under threat. They're under threat right now, in this very room probably. So welcome those folks that are looking for that. But I need you to think about the supply chain all the way down to your subs. I'm thinking about your supply chain all the way down to the subs. How are you protecting our information all the way through, all the way down to the last very vendor that's got access to the files and access to the information? So cybersecurity is much more important to us. And this last bullet here is what's next is kind of interesting. Again, I mentioned Dave Spurk and his entrance into the command recently. And he's been doing a great job of bringing in guest speakers to kind of raise our tide of our comfort level with artificial intelligence, machine learning. And you all know the hype curve, right? There's a hype curve that, you got the peak of heightened expectations and then the trough of disillusionment and then the slope of enlightenment. We're all trying to get onto the slope of enlightenment. But Mr. Spurk has done a good job of bringing in speakers that represent both ends of the spectrum. Some folks that say, hey, artificial intelligence and machine learning is here right now, and you guys are way behind, to others that are kind of warning us about the hype. So it's been very, very, very useful for us. We did have a guest speaker one day, and he was definitely at the peak of heightened expectations. He was telling us, you're behind. You need to move out. This technology exists today. And as a government acquisition professional, I was reflecting on the fact, listening to him, that no one's really coming in and knocking my door down trying to get this technology into me, and that's usually the relationship that we have. If you've got something, you're not shy about it. And so I said that to the guest speaker. I said, hey, no one's knocking my door down on this stuff. And he said, where's your door? Which I thought was a very clever response and also a good criticism. The door, our access to industry for this information domain may not be as clearly marked as it should be. So I want to try to help with that and turn the porch light on so we all know where the front door is. Let me start with this, competitive and collaborative. I'm just going to focus on the bottom right-hand corner for just a second because numbers do matter. Hey, listen, we take our role in trying to find the most innovative and the most agile industry partners that we can. And we take that very seriously, whether they're large, small, et cetera. We're looking for agility. We're looking for innovation. That bottom right-hand corner, though, just shows you that we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're being competitive, and we are working with small business across the board to find those technologies. TILO, Technology Industry Liaison Office, is our official front door. That's where the porch light is. And that's where, if you've got an idea, you should come in. I will freely admit to you today that I think TILO has atrophied a bit, and it is not kept up with the social media era that we all live in. So you've got my promise that I am going to revamp TILO over the next coming weeks so that you've got something that you can feel more comfortable with interacting with. So I've heard your feedback. NDIA is helping us out with a survey. So some of you have surveys that you're responding to about TILO. I've also surveyed our community because there's a little bit of a push and a pull. We're going to revamp TILO to make that a more accessible front door. SOFWorks is another front door, right? It's okay to have more than one door, right? I think you guys should appreciate that. But SOFWorks, as I had mentioned before, very, very effective, and that ecosystem we've developed out there is really paying off dividends. So finally, in terms of front doors, I've talked about TILO. I've talked about SOFWorks. We've got a great LinkedIn presence. I've talked to a lot of you on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time on that. The last thing I want to mention on this slide is Vulcan. If you haven't heard of Vulcan, vulcan-soft.com. This is our social media. This is our online tech database for issues. And I want to tell you something. This is not just SOF. This is 370 government agencies, 370 throughout DOD, plus other government agencies are using Vulcan to look for technology. If I wanted to go look for a counter-UAS system right now, the first place I would go is into Vulcan. I would log in with my CAC, and I would type in counter-UAS into the search engine, and all the technologies that were in that database would be presented to me. If I were you, if I were a vendor, I would be in Vulcan. Because you've got a great audience looking at your stuff. It's a little Yelp-like, if I can still use that analogy. You submit your white papers, your videos, your glossies, whatever you want to submit, and then folks that have touched your technology, have seen your technology, they will get in there and they'll talk about it. They'll talk about what the TRL is, the technology readiness level. They'll talk about their assessment of your manufacturing readiness level, and you'll start getting the community talking about your product. That's where you want to be. So I would ask you to look at Vulcan. You can't see each other's stuff, so be confident in that. Only a government CAC holder can see your information. It's not visible to other industry partners, so be confident there. All right, so a little bit of a challenge for you all. As I just briefed you on, we're authorized to speed. I'm getting all sorts of help from, and I mean that. I'm getting help from OSD and Congress, good help, to move faster, more affordable, to get better products. What are you doing? Okay, that's the question I would ask you. If you think of SOF as a service, if you think of us like you think about the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. I underline that dash like. So USSOCOM is service like. I personally underline that dash like, and I would ask you to as well. I don't have the budget flexibility that the services do, and I've got different time constraints, schedule constraints than the services do. I've got a combatant commander that I work for. And the problems that he presents to my acquisition workforce are very temporal. They fight tonight, they'll be fighting tomorrow night. So my budget and schedule constraints are different than services. And if you bring me your same acquisition strategy you bring to the services, we're going to have a fractious relationship, and I don't want that. I want you to show me how you're going to work with SOF and be as SOF-like as I'm trying to move my organization to be. Okay? My last real slide, just again, this is a great week. There are all sorts of opportunities. In about an hour and a half, we'll have the component commanders sitting up here, and they'll be giving you a panel briefing. This afternoon, we have a large business forum that's by invitation only. We'll be doing a small business forum later on in the week. Mr. West will be here giving a keynote presentation. Ms. Cummings will be here giving a keynote presentation. And as I mentioned on Thursday, Dave Spurk's information panel will be on as well. So really, really great opportunities. And again, as General Carlisle said, get up to that floor upstairs. I can't wait to do it myself and see all the great technologies that are up there. I will finish where I started and just say thank you. And I'm going to ask General Clarke to join me on stage, sir, please. And we'll start going through your questions. We'll have about 10 minutes. The mayor is here.
Okay. Well done.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so we can't see any questions yet. I'm going to start making up questions if you don't put some up here real quick.
Or you were so good that no questions warranted.
So the first question is a good one. Is anyone working to update the federal acquisition regulation to adopt the theme of accelerating innovation? Is it fair? Is it too fair to be effective? So I'd answer that question probably two ways. The first one is, we are looking at non-FAR-based acquisition contracting efforts. So I mentioned other transaction agreements, and we're looking at those to try to, A, retain the spirit of competition, but also to move more agilely. There is a panel, I think it's the 899 panel, that is looking at everything about acquisition to include the FAR. So that is being looked at. So you want to take the second one?
Yeah, CWMD.
Yes, sir. So the second question is, now that CWMD is with SOCOM, what are your S&T and material development priorities to address gaps in this area? And the CG mentioned this a little bit. The fact that we are the coordinating authority for weapons of mass destruction hasn't changed the fact that we still have the entire DoD that is focused on the counter weapons of mass destruction lane in terms of those things that are not peculiar to SOF. The biotechnology suits that we wear, the pro masks, those types of things will still remain non-SOF specific and will still remain in the services and in the DoD. As everyone in this audience should know, we have a very specific mission, as General Clarke laid out, for finding across the pathway of weapons of mass destruction to detect where they are, to find them, and then to render them obsolete. I won't go into a lot more detail in this forum, but those types of technologies for that niche capability that is core to the USSOCOM mission are the things that we're looking for. And if you want to pull General Joel, how about that, Joel? Colonel Joel Babbitt off to the side, I'm sure he can give you more detail on that.
Okay, I'll take the next one about what's changed in the international operational environment. I put it as twofold. Number one is, and I mentioned both of these in my remarks. One is the competition aspect that we have against state actors today, and their rise, recognized by the National Defense Strategy, but they are clearly closing some of the gaps that we heretofore enjoyed. We had great advantages in many spaces in all domains, and in many of those domains, those are closing. But then the other impact of that, and the other aspect is growing, is their use of information warfare, and in the speed and in the volume that they are doing so. And as I mentioned, we have to be able to counter that from a SOCOM perspective. We have responsibility for MISO, PsyOps. And then we have to take that and run with it for in the future.
Thanks. Next question there is, and I appreciate this question, because how do you know when you've completed the hyper-enabled operator vision? Is there an end, or is it perpetual? What's the plan to transition tech to acquisitions? So very good question, thank you. So I would say hyper-enabled operator didn't have a start, and it won't have an end. We are constantly trying to hyper-enable the operator. I think the greatest example you may have noticed on Master Sergeant Knetz's chest was a tactical assault kit, Android tactical assault kit. Phenomenal advance in where we fielded that a few years ago, and given situational awareness to the operator. So that's hyper-enabling the operator. And so that won't end. I think one of the things with the TALOS effort was we had a very clear five-year mark on the wall. We're not doing that with hyper-enabled operator. We will continually spin out technologies as they come aboard, and we're not going to stop focusing on how do we dominate this information space for that individual operator.
Yeah. And if I could, Jim, a little finer point. I think as we looked at TALOS, what you think about is the guy in the front of the stack, the front man that is wearing the TALOS suit, and it's the guy on the ground. As we look at the operator, we're looking at broader. The operator could be defined as the pilot who's in the lead aircraft or in all aircraft, so they can see to the edge. Think in terms of not Tony Stark with the outfit and what you're looking at. Think of Tony Stark in the Iron Man suit looking out, and what is he or she seeing that enables them to see at the speed of necessity and relevance. And that's what I'm thinking about as that hyper-enabler operator, and not just the person on the ground, but the person that could be underwater, could be in the air, or could be on the ground.
Yes, sir. So did you want the next one?
Which,
I can start.
it's a great question. Is the counter social media disinformation business better left to government civilian partners? What I would highlight is Department of State does have what they call the Global Engagement Center, or the GEC. We are already partnered with that entity so that we will stay specifically in the military lane as it becomes to information operations, where they will remain in the diplomatic and public domain in that realm. It's a great question. Thanks for asking it.
The next one is, what are your concerns and guidance regarding the fact that our near-peer competitors have had open source info on our tactics, techniques, and procedures? This is a really good question as well. You know, there is a challenge that we walk a balance of every day of trying to operate in this open information system because we want to attract partners that are not necessarily traditional partners. And so SOFWorks, for instance, is an acknowledged, unclassified facility. It's downtown in Ybor City in Tampa, and we acknowledge that everything we talk about there is probably already available to partners that we might not want to be sharing that information with. But that's why we take it very seriously that we're unclassified. The flip side of that coin is, if we weren't operating in that domain, we would be missing out on a great deal of information that is relevant to our forces and that we need to have access to as we transition to this information space. So we have SOFWorks. Believe me when I tell you, we also have a counterpart capability that is in the, not in the unclassified space, that we can do that type of work in as well. And we work to transition things out of that space and into the other space when appropriate. To when it's time to lock it down, that's a little bit of the balance when we move it into the lockdown phase.
And Jim, if I could comment,
sure.
The other aspect that is near and dear to our hearts is one of our priorities, is that we have to make some of this information available for our allies and partners. We will never go to war alone, and what we have to classify the most sensitive things, but we also have to make sure that it's realistic so that we can share those things with allies and partners, when applicable.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Go ahead. What is SOCOM AT&L doing to be better aware of and manage supply chain risk to prevent impact of counterfeit and cyber threats to soft kit from hostile actors? No, absolutely. So we've along with DoD, so DoD shares this concern, obviously. We're looking at what contract clauses that there should be to make sure that we've got greater visibility into supply chains. And how do you report? How do we ask you for that information? How do you assure us that you've got supply chain accountability and you've taken into account cyber? When do we take systems offline so that some of our technology never touches the internet? So then how do we validate that? How do we verify that? So we're going to be a little bit more intrusive in that space. You'll see through the contracting mechanisms is where you're going to see that we're going to make sure that our data doesn't get to a place where we're not comfortable with it being. I got it, sir.
You have that.
Do you see SOF Explorer space-based systems? Yes, we do. We've had a technology demonstration going on for the past few years with the CubeSat program. It's been pretty successful. The idea of we pay for the CubeSat, a very inexpensive end item. We put the right sensor on it, and we ride on a launch. We don't pay for the launch. We just got to find the right ride. We're hitchhiking, essentially. But we can then put a sensor that is responsive to our specific technologies, our specific communication devices, and put that sensor over a place on the globe where we need exfil of that data. So that's been pretty interesting to us, and like I said, it's a technology demonstration right now. We do see that expanding, especially in this CubeSat space, which would appear to be a survivable platform in a near-peer competition. What else can we do from that platform in that size, weight, volume package to exfil or get that information that we need to be able to find and fix, exploit, and analyze on the battlefield?
Yeah, let me jump on top of that one. SOF can't fight today without space. It is a critical domain and will only become more important in the future. So as we look at space-based requirements for SOF, they are not just in all cases space unique, or SOF unique space-based capabilities, but the things we are going to need to continue to fight for and maintain in the future. It's our comms, It's our GPS enabled. It's the identification of warnings for us. And so as we look at space going in the future and the advent of SpaceCom, we will be partnered with them to make sure that our requirements are known to SpaceCom. But we will also make sure that if there are soft, unique things that we need, we will emphasize that and make sure that we retain and/or gain those capability requirements.
Sir, thank you. For ACT Agility, SOFWorks, getting technology into the warfighter's hands, this usually falls short after the initial concept due to contracting. What's next? I think there's an assumption in there. I think, as I kind of stated during my remarks, I'm very proud of our contracting workforce as they adopt these new capabilities and new technologies. So as you've seen with the use of, specifically with OTs, other transaction agreements, we've become very much more responsive from our contracting standpoint to go from a concept to being on contract. Again, that timeline has now gone from over 2 years to inside that 0 to 2 year time frame. So I would challenge that question, actually, that I think you should see us, you can call me on this, but you should see us going forward with a much more agility in the contracting space as well to get after those concepts that come in the front door. Very important question here. Yes, I'm seeing a ton of people taking pictures of the slides. They will be available for download if you paid your registration fee, and we did not waive the registration fee per General Clarke. Sir. Okay. Can you elaborate on the use of
Jim, this is good because they're giving you all the questions.
Yes, sir.
I'm fine.
No, that's good, sir. Can you elaborate on the use of partnership intermediary agreements and other transaction agreements with other command groups by way of leveraged research universities, SMEs, and industry for soft missions? I think that, first of all, I'll talk about SOFWorks as a partnership intermediary agreement. We completed that several years ago. We'll compete it again when the time frame comes up. We're teamed right now with Doolittle, is who runs our SOFWorks facility. Doolittle works very, very hard to have relevant entanglements, in a good sense, with our labs, universities, etc. There are 30-something interns working out at SOFWorks from not only local colleges, but colleges from across the country. So there's entanglement there. There's entanglement with fellowship programs from folks coming in from the labs and industry that are working at SOFWorks. So I think that PIA has allowed, Partnership Intermediary Agreement has allowed us to be much more agile in that space and to work with a lot of partners that we haven't. I also think OTAs are going to stretch that out too. We can make OTA awards to those non-traditional partners. SOCOM just recently has the ability now to offer grants to universities as well. So I see as we get greater authority in the acquisition space, it's going to enable us to work with other partners more agilely.
Yeah. The mayor was not able to make it, so I think at this point in time we're not going to take any more questions. But thank you all for your attention. Thanks to General Carlisle, NDIA, and everybody for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hey, sir. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Before you walk out